Hey, what's going on, guys? So we're gonna give it one more try. I was having like some really loud echo in my earphones. I got some new earphones now, so let me share this, and then we'll just kind of begin. All right. Okay, you guys. So starting a little bit late today, some technical difficulties. We're gonna be talking about poor metabolic health and how I would personally go about correcting those metabolic health markers, and what's worked for a lot of my clients over the years as well. Uh, it's a very straightforward approach. It's basic. It costs very little. Okay, so the accessibility is there for most people as well. Okay, and this is a very important topic, especially in America, because as of 2025, 9 out of 10 Americans right now are metabolically unhealthy. And it is a serious problem, but the good thing is when very basic health principles are implemented on a consistent basis and when people know what to look for and what to do, they're quite easy to correct. You know, like blood pressure is very common, high blood pressure rather, definitely need blood pressure. But high blood pressure is very common. So we have, believe it or not, like 900,000, some close to 900,000 Americans dying every single year of heart disease, every single year. And those are just the people that die. You know, like half of the people that have a heart attack don't die from it. So there are a lot more people that actually do have heart attacks that don't die. And it's still very serious and can cause like various health complications. And the good thing is it's so easy to avoid, you know. And then we also have like strokes and cancers, etc. I think close to 650,000 Americans die from cancer every single year. Last time I checked, and close to 50% of Americans develop cancer within their lifetime as well. So between people that have heart attacks and people that have cancers, I mean, look, it's the weekend, and imagine going out with your friends. It's you and three other friends. One will die from a heart attack, one will die from cancer. So it's quite a high percentage. You know, 50% of Americans that die from one of those two. And then we'll also have to take into consideration that I got to double check this number again, but close to like 230,000, 250,000 Americans die from medical drug side effects every single year. And that number is pretty atrocious because, like, for example, compared to the Vietnam War, which was a 10-year conflict, I believe like close to 50,000 American soldiers died in that conflict alone. And that's in a combat zone, 50,000 over a 10-year period, which is about 5,000 military deaths every single year. But we have close to 200,000 plus civilian deaths every year just from side effects from medical drugs, okay? So these numbers are very serious. And again, it's 2025 and 9 out of 10 Americans are right now metabolically unhealthy. I'm going to define what that is in a second. And that's an important number to consider. And I'm not exaggerating that number. You can find studies that will reflect that number left and right on pubmed.gov if you want to look for yourself. And this is important to consider because 85% of personal bankruptcies in the US are currently due to health issues. And a lot of those health issues, of course, sometimes you have the unfortunate car accident and stuff of that sort, of course, but a lot of the health issues that are represented in that number are very preventable from, again, just very, very basic understanding of basic health principles, and more importantly, actually the application of those health principles in a culture, unfortunately, that doesn't facilitate mental or physical health very well. Because as I mentioned many times, as of 2025, Americans right now are mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history. Even when you take all 28 human species that have come and gone into consideration over the 4.5 billion years of Earth's evolution. And I know it's kind of like a negative topic, but I believe it's critical to shine light seriously on this problem so we can take the right steps in preventing a lot of these diseases, which are, again, so abysmally simple to prevent. And actually, the prevention of them will save you a gargantuous amount of money. And it actually costs a lot less money to be healthy. I'll explain why in a second. So here are the metabolic health markers you want to consider when evaluating, am I metabolically healthy or not? So first is body fat percentage. So for males, you want to be between 10 to 12% body fat ideally. If you want to stretch it a little bit, 10 to 15%. You can get something like a DEXA scan done. That would be the gold standard for body fat testing. Or you could just kind of do a mirror check. So here's an easy one that'll give you a pretty actually accurate representation of where you are. So let's say if you grab the belly fat around your belly button, right below your belly button, if it feels like there's about an inch of fat density there, you are already at about most likely 20% body fat for a male. Okay, so how it works is 20% is considered overweight. Caesar, what is going on? I'm talking about metabolic health today. So if you have any questions about high blood pressure, triglyceride levels, low HDL, maybe a high A1C, et cetera, or body fat, just let me know. And happy to discuss this topic with you because it's very important. But if you grab your, the fat under your belly button, and it's about 1 inch, you're already at 20%. And 20% is overweight for a male, 25% is obese, and over 35% is considered morbidly obese. I would personally consider 30% and above as morbidly obese. But that's the standard measurement currently, okay? So again, if you want to be super precise, you can get a DEXA scan. They're very easy. They're about like $100 last time I checked. They're available in most cities. And basically you lay in a bed and they scan your body, and 2 minutes later you pretty much get a printout and discussion of where your body fat percentage is. The average American male is currently at about 25 to 27%, which is obese. And that makes sense because 85% of Americans are either overweight or obese. So it's not too surprising. If you do get a DEXA scan and that number comes in a lot higher than you think it is, because it's very common these days for people that are very overweight to actually not think they're overweight, or people that are very obese to think they're just overweight, where in fact they're actually probably morbidly obese. I've had many clients come in that are very active and unfortunately doing things like CrossFit and stuff of that sort, and they're like, well, I'm active and this and that, and then we run their body fat numbers and they're showing that they're obese, and the person's not like huge, but they're still considered obese. You know, a lot of times, especially if a person has low muscle density or low muscle mass, they can kind of look not that overweight, especially with clothing on. But once you take their numbers, you see they're like easily 25%, 30%, 35% or above. And this is so common. And you guys, I would highly recommend just do that simple fat test that I told you if you really don't want to go out of your way, or do the DEXA scan. Because unfortunately, nothing's going to change if a person isn't problem aware. And Americans become metabolically unhealthy, and 90% of them are currently metabolically unhealthy because they are problem unaware. They don't know that they're sick, and they don't know they're living a life of normalized pathology. And oftentimes just getting this more objective measurements and tools of measurement help shine some light that, hey, you know, your body has been crying for help for a very long time, but because American culture has normalized mental and physical pathology to such an extreme extent, a lot of people don't listen to those cries for help. Like excess body fat around the chest or the midsection is a cry for help. Digestive issues is a cry for help. High blood pressure is a cry for help. Mental disorders such as, you know, chronic and clinical levels of depression or anxiety is a cry for help. And unfortunately, just a lot of Americans, they don't listen to these cries for help and usually drown them out with a lot of various medical drugs. And there's inevitably, at the end of the day, not too much wrong with using medical drugs. The issue becomes is when people use them as a crutch to not create real change. That's inevitably real change in certain behaviors that are inevitably leading to those issues. So body fat is one marker of metabolic health. Another marker is blood pressure. So for blood pressure, you want your blood pressure to be 120 over 80 or below. Okay? That's another important measurement. You can get a blood pressure cuff off Amazon, a digital one, very inexpensive. You can get that done and just see where you're at. The digital ones jump around a little bit, but if you just consistently take it throughout the week, let's say you take it 3 different times throughout the week for, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, and then average out that number, you could have a good reading of where your blood pressure is at and then take corrective action. Again, it's all about bringing problem awareness to people that are problem unaware. Because no one at the end of the day wants to be sick, but when sickness has been normalized and is so common in society, the problem is people that are quite sick don't even realize it. But when you show them these numbers, they become more problem aware and thus look for more realistic solutions. So important. Another one is average blood glucose levels. So there, for that metabolic marker, you want to be between 70 milligrams per deciliter to 100 milligrams per deciliter, okay? And a lot of times, all of these markers, except maybe the body fat measurement, are taken when you get your annual blood work done, like very, very basic blood work done. You can get far more comprehensive panels, but even if you just get these numbers done every year, maybe twice a year, and just track them, that's already such a huge step in the right direction to basically determine whether you are actually healthy or not. Because these metabolic markers, you can look at them as like the foundation and frame to your house. There's more to your house than obviously the foundation and the frame, but if the foundation and frame are really strong, you have like an amazing base and already doing great. And from what I've seen with blood work, once you get your metabolic numbers to line up, even if you get more comprehensive panels done, a lot of those other numbers line up as well. So it has a positive cascade effect on a lot of those other numbers, markers rather. So another one is triglycerides. So triglycerides you want basically to be lower than 150 milligrams per deciliter, okay? That one's super easy to, in fact, all of these are super easy to align within normal healthy ranges. And I've been coaching people with metabolic health, in fact, not even focusing on the metabolic health numbers themselves, but moreover focusing on changing the behaviors of the person that is leading to the poor metabolic health markers. And then ironically, the metabolic health markers always line up. I interviewed Igor on this slide before. You guys can check out his numbers. He came in with extremely high, I think his triglycerides were at 350 to maybe reaching 400. He had, I believe, if I remember correctly, high blood pressure, low HDL, very high body fat percentage. He was obese. He went to the medical doctor's office and they told him he needed to be on 3 different drugs, statins, blood pressure medication, and something for his triglycerides. Just with 5 months of working together, and again, just changing the person's behaviors and belief systems that are leading to this problem, he was able to get all of his ranges into the normal range, all of his markers into the normal range without the use of medical drugs, okay? And I've interviewed already so many people. Tim Petro, he got off 9 medical drugs within 6 months, and he's a 60-year-old guy. And he actually came to me during COVID. So he didn't have a gym. All I had him doing was just band workouts at home. And he had a nature preserve nearby and just kind of going for 2 very long walks out in nature per week as well. Of course, we worked on changing a gargantuous amount of his nutrition practices and also a lot of lifestyle variables. And we worked on a lot of his core values and getting them more aligned with a health conscious lifestyle. But he got off 9 medical drugs in 6 months. Okay. And then just check out my website again. A myriad of people getting off blood pressure, etc. Just becoming healthy enough to no longer need these drugs. Because when you have like high blood pressure or high triglycerides or whatever, high cholesterol, you're not like statin deficient, you're just not living a health conscious and sustainable lifestyle. And the other variable to consider is an HDL. With HDL, you actually want it to be higher than 39 milligrams per deciliter. And a lot of people are low. So having too low of an HDL is not a good thing. And how metabolic health works is basically the standard definition is you need 2 of these markers to be out of range to be considered metabolically unhealthy. And I would argue just 1 of them out of range is considered metabolically unhealthy. And 90% of Americans are out of range on 2 or more of these. So again, body fat, blood pressure, average blood glucose levels, triglycerides, HDL, etc., etc. 90% of Americans are out of range in at least two or more of those markers. And if you're out of range on at least two or more of those markers, you are considered metabolically unwell, which increases your chance of premature death and various other diseases, et cetera, et cetera. Because again, those markers act as a foundation to your entire mental and physical health, okay? So that's how we would be measuring them. And here are some general solutions that I found worked well with myself. I am 40 years old and I have perfect metabolic health markers, also perfect hormonal health markers as well, et cetera, et cetera. And then also what have worked with various clients of various ages, ranging from 30 years old, 40, 50, 60 years old, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Another thing to consider, and this is important as well, with like blood pressure, they're like, I hear this often. Oh, I have I even heard people say I have high triglycerides because it runs in my family. So first of all, when you have a metabolic health marker that is out of range, it's so rare that it's due to poor genetics. With blood pressure, for example, people that have naturally extremely high blood pressure, it's maybe 1 out of every 350 people that struggle with high blood pressure. Okay, so it's a very, very small percentage. And I would even argue that even if it has a genetic basis to being out of range, genetics loads the gun, but your decisions in life pull the trigger. Okay, so you still have like a tremendous amount of power over whether to be metabolically healthy or not, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So here are some solutions that I found worked, again, for myself and a lot of my clients. So, and in fact, just mastering these concepts, I've never had a client not get any of his metabolic health markers in healthy ranges. Just results speak for themselves, you know, and I have like a bunch of testimonials on my clients. I even interview these clients, so you know they're real, et cetera, and stuff of that sort. So I don't know what to say. It's not so much, you know, what's on paper. It's like what's happening in real life and stuff of that sort. So you can go check out a lot of their interviews and see what has worked for them. Okay. So these aren't in any hierarchy of importance. I'm just going to kind of go in random order. Don, good to see you. I saw some other people jumped in here. So first and foremost, one good thing a person can focus on, if their body fat is too high, meaning way above 12% for a male, the first thing that I would say needs to be focused on is just bringing their body fat down to a normal range. So again, the average American is at 27% body fat. Then we would need to bring that person down from 27% to at least 12% body fat. And the good thing with bringing your body fat percentage down is no matter what diet you use to bring your body fat percentage down, and there's some that are way better than others, it's going to bring the systemic inflammation in your body down a tremendous amount regardless, okay? So as body fat goes down, inflammation in the body goes down in all 12 of the human systems. And remember, all of these systems are interconnected. So sure, they could be identified as individually, but they're all functioning as one unit to kind of keep you alive and basically help you survive in the external world a little bit better, all right? So bringing your body fat down would be the first step. So again, if you're, let's say 20%, which is overweight for males, or 25%, which is 25% or above, which is obese for males, your first goal should be to bring your body fat down to 10 or 12%. And most of the time, that would actually even out a lot of these biological metabolic health markers as well. So another thing to consider is improving your body fat to muscle ratio. So ideally you want as much muscle as possible and as little body fat as possible. As little body fat as possible, meaning keeping your body fat around 10 or 12% range. And that would help improve not only improve your body composition aesthetically a tremendous amount, but it would also help you improve your metabolic health markers as well, and actually make it much easier for you to sustain these metabolic health markers also. So that's another important thing to consider. And what I found worked really well for improving your body fat to muscle ratio from a training perspective is to mainly be on hypertrophy type of workouts. So workouts that emphasize muscle development and muscle growth, which is going to be like a very slow process, especially after your first 2 years. So it needs to be like a lifelong activity. But over the years, you will see your body composition will improve. Rob, what is going on? We're talking about metabolic health today, and it's a good reminder for me to take a little coffee break. So, again, improving your muscle to fat ratio. And what I found worked really well is just to be on a hypertrophy, ideally weight training routine, and having a weight training routine as your primary form of fitness, especially as you get older. Especially with men, I would say, Rob, what is going on? Especially with men, I would say like 35 or older, they should definitely double down on being on a really good weightlifting program for a couple of reasons. One reason is if your aesthetics or looks are very important for you, basically the only way you're going to keep your body looking young is by having a lot of muscle mass, and that's it. Once people get old, they lose muscle mass at an accelerated rate when they're not living a health conscious and sustainable lifestyle. And if you see a lot of your friends that didn't take care of themselves, like in their 20s or 30s, or maybe took care of themselves in their 20s but let themselves go in their 30s, you see they start looking quite old when they hit 40, and then exponentially much, much older when they hit 50. And that's because the very little muscle mass they had going into their 40s starts depreciating. And then once you get into your 50s, it starts compounding greatly at an accelerated rate, and you start kind of looking like a shriveled prune. Aesthetically, that provides like kind of looser skin, which kind of contributes to that more look and aged appearance. But then metabolically, it hurts you as well because your muscle mass is low, your body fat percentage is quite high, or your fat mass is quite high. And that increases your chance of having poor metabolic health markers, among a myriad of hormonal issues as well. Usually as your body fat increases, your body starts aromatizing testosterone into estrogen at an even faster rate, and thus making it harder for you to gain or retain muscle, etc., which makes all of this stuff even worse. So it has like a cascading effect, basically, a negative cascading effect. So I found weight training as a primary form of fitness to be ideal for males that want to maintain their aesthetics into older age, maintain their independence into older age, because especially developing a very strong and durable core. Remember the core, you guys, it's not just your six pack, it's your glutes, your pelvic floor muscles, all of the muscles in your midsection, being the external obliques, internal obliques, transverse abdominis, the psoas, the rectus abdominis, the quadratus lumborum, the multi-ifidi, the multiple layers of the erector spinae muscles, etc. And also, believe it or not, even your lats are part of your core. And strengthening those in a way so that all of those muscles work as one unit. I forgot to include the glutes as well, which is a very, very important part of the core. But working as one unit to help stabilize the spine and the hips is what's going to keep you independent into old age as well. And you could do this to a degree with body weight exercises, of course, but it's far more ideal to do it with weights because you can progressively overload in far more steps than you can with body weight. All right, so something to consider. So again, when you're looking to improve and optimize your metabolic health markers, you need to have a good body fat percentage if you are not within a good healthy range as a first step. So if you are a male and you are not around 10 or 12% body fat, which 90% of males are not around that body fat percentage, you need to primarily focus on getting your body fat down to 10 to 12% as a first step. And once you take self-sabotage out of the equation, it really just comes down to nutritional practice and guidance. And from a nutritional perspective, don't look for cookie cutter trendy programs. Please don't do this. the only, like I mentioned many times, the only nutrition program that's ideal for you is one that's built out specifically for you. And then one eventually that you're going to have to tinker with over the years to see what works well for you and what doesn't work well for you. But generally speaking, there are three variables to focus on when building out a nutrition program. One is, how many calories should I have? Obviously, if a person is 300 pounds, generally speaking, they need way more calories, even in a caloric deficit, than a person that's 200 pounds. The second step is, how should I structure my macromolecules? How should I structure my proteins, carbs, and fats? And that's going to vary from person to person as well. Ideally, especially when losing body fat, a bit higher protein is more recommended. And generally speaking, you don't want your you don't want your fat intake to be lower than 30% on a 30% of your total calories on a consistent basis, you know? And then the third thing is sourcing. Obviously, you don't want to just hit your protein, carbs, and fats from processed food and protein shakes all day, okay? So you want to source healthy foods that your digestive system has spent already millions of years evolving to recognize. So this is going to mainly be whole food, not like the grocery store whole food, but like, for example, the steak, vegetables, fruits, etc., etc. Food that are in their whole state and basically not processed. Not only will these type of foods keep you very full in a caloric deficit, but your digestive system will be able to recognize this type of food and be able to assimilate it appropriately without having any health issues or quote unquote side effects arising. Okay? And if you want to go a step above and beyond, you can get something like a Biome FX stool test done. You can find this online, or you can message me. I can send you a link as well. I don't get any kickbacks from these. This is a stool test that is mailed to you. You take a sample and then you mail it back to a lab, and you get an overview of how well your digestive system is doing. It'll give you information on if you have a bacterial overgrowth or a fungal overgrowth or a parasite overgrowth, which is very, very common in a lot of Americans. And I think more importantly, it'll give you an overview on how your keystone species in your gut are doing. Keystone species are very important. You have to kind of look at them as the foundation to your digestive system. And most Americans are going to have a lot of discrepancies in their keystone species. Like some of them will be very, very low. Some of them will be very, very high. And this is very common with an industrial food system because inevitably the diversity is quite limited. And also, to make it matters even worse, people typically even limit it even more by the choices they select. And what happens is keystone species, they kind of require food to survive, like you require food to survive. And if you keep eating a certain type of food, it's just going to be feeding a certain type of keystone species excessively. So it'll keep growing and kind of starving out other keystone species. So it'll kind of go down and it'll create what's referred to as gut dysbiosis. And then you're going to have, you then increase the rate or the risk of having basically various digestive issues over the years. And this is also fueled by a very low quantity of fiber consumed by the average American, and then a very low diversity of fiber consumed by the average American as well, because inevitably these keystone species rely on fiber to keep them fed, right? And just to give you an idea, I mean, a hunter-gatherer ate around 150 to 200 grams of fiber per day, where the average American eats around 20 grams of fiber per day. So obviously these keystone species aren't going to be getting the food they need, but yet your to keep surviving and keep functioning well, but those keystone species are what your digestive system relies on to be healthy and to be able to assimilate and break down food appropriately without causing various gut issues, digestive issues. So, okay, so we mentioned got to decrease body fat. Also, you have to work on improving your muscle mass to fat ratio. This is super important, not only for your aesthetics, but also for your metabolic health, especially for your kind of average blood glucose level, okay? To help regulate it in an easy way. And And to do that, I mentioned the next step is to be on some type of hypertrophy program. That's what I found worked really well for most people, and having weightlifting be the primary source of their physical exercise. This becomes even more important with age because, again, you're fighting against the depreciation of muscle mass. But don't worry, you guys, another big misconception is that metabolism, you hear this often, oh, like I'm getting overweight easily because of my age. But metabolism actually, your body's ability to basically break down calories efficiently, basically doesn't change from when you're 25 to you're 65. It kind of stays very, very the same. And in fact, I would argue if you just keep lifting weights, your metabolism would actually improve over the years. Like I'm 40 years old and I need 3,000 calories a day or 3,200 calories a day just to be able to maintain a body weight of about 200 to 205 pounds frame, okay, which is quite a bit. And this is important too to creating sustainable fat loss practices because I don't eat out, but if I were to eat out, I wouldn't gain 5 pounds after every meal, etc., because my body is able to break these calories down, and I have a lot of muscle mass that is able to absorb these calories as well, and not convert it, not those calories be converted into fat stores. So this is important. You got to be patient with that one because putting on muscle, it takes quite a bit of time and persistence, and consistency is king. So make sure to stay injury free as well. So another thing to consider for perfect metabolic health, and this goes back to nutritional practices, is making sure your diet is very balanced overall with your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. This is super important. A very dumbed down version of how to do this without having a PhD in nutrition is basically if you just eat pasture-raised meats fed a species-specific diet, wild fish, fruits and vegetables, you'll have a 1-to-1 or maybe even 2 or 3-to-1 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which is perfect. You want, for every 1 omega-3, for example, roughly speaking, you want 1 omega-6. Omega-6 is kind of like a pro-inflammatory, and omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory. Your body needs both of these, but it needs both of these in a balanced way, just like anything. And the problem with American diets is typically the average American has like 20 to 30 omega-6s for every 1 omega-3. What you want is 1-to-1. So how I do it personally is so simple. You guys, this is kind of like so simple, stupid. Is basically I eat like elk, deer, grass-fed and grass-finished beef, grass-fed and grass-finished bison, and an assortment of wild fish. And then on top of that, I eat a lot of organic fruit and vegetables as well. And that's it. And then you have that perfect omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Once you start introducing a lot of seed oils, they're going to be seed oils into your diet, like canola oil, for example. They're going to be very rich in omega-3s, omega-6s. And again, nothing wrong with them, but it's just when they're out of balance, that's when you have chronic inflammation in your body, and which could lead to not only excess body weight, which will lead to higher metabolic health markers, but it could actually lead to higher metabolic health markers in general. So nothing is wrong with consuming omega-6s. But again, if you're consuming omega-6s, especially in liquid form, like a lot of these cooking oils, the chances of the omega-6 being extremely high to omega-3 is very high, you know? So I really don't even use cooking oils for the most part. I just use parchment paper, I put it in a pan, boom, throw it in the oven or countertop oven, and done. And you save yourself from having to buy oils as well. So that's an easy way to optimize your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio and stuff of that sort. So again, quick rehearsal, you guys. For perfect metabolic health, you have to get your body fat down if it's too high. Ideally for males, it's 10 to 12%. Okay, we mentioned that. You have to improve your, Christian, what is going on? Good to see you. You have to improve your muscle to fat ratio. Ideally have as much muscle as you can to as little fat as you can. And again, as little fat as you can, meaning keeping it around 10 or 12%. And then also optimize your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. I kind of mentioned a very easy way of how to do that. And then another thing you can kind of focus on is basically food sourcing. So remember, everything about you is made out of food. It sounds super weird, but if you think about it, your mom's egg required food to form. Your dad's sperm required food to form. When your mom was conceiving you, it required food to form throughout the various stages. And then as you progress through life, through your various decades, you required various food to kind of sustain your bodily systems, 12 human systems. Okay? So obviously, if you are eating sick animals and sick plants grown with a myriad of biocides, you can't expect to be healthy yourself. So food sourcing is very important. You can check out many of my podcasts, like on guest appearances, like on Mark Bell's podcast, Paul Chek's Living 4D podcast, many other podcasts. I talk about food sourcing, especially in America, in exorbitant depth. And you can check those out for free resources, or you can go on Amazon and order my book titled The Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide, which covers all of the labels and how to source. I hate to use the word natural because it's so overused, but how to source, animals that are fed a species-specific diet, which is very important for their nutritional profile, and basically how to find healthy food in America, which has become a little bit more difficult to do. But if you know how to read the labels and where to look, and I include all the links in that book and on the podcast appearances, etc., it's pretty easy to do so. And don't worry, you guys, you have enough money to eat healthy. The average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 a year on eating out and other bullshit expenses, okay, which only contribute to their obesity. Just go to any restaurant, any average restaurant, especially like a fast food place, and take a look at who's sitting in there and ask yourself if you want to look like anyone in there. I highly doubt you would say yes to pretty much 99.9% of people, okay? Very overweight, skin condition is very bad, look very, very old, etc. So, okay. Another thing to consider is, and again, you guys, these things are kind of like easy to understand at the intellectual level, which is where a lot of people go wrong. And they're like, well, I get it. I know you understand it, but it's like, are you actually doing these things? And for 9 out of 10 Americans that are metabolically unhealthy right now, I would argue not even close. Because even if they're doing these things slightly, they would not be metabolically sick. If they were just mastering these concepts, even with half-ass effort, it wouldn't be the case, because these metabolic health markers are so easy to reverse and bring into health ranges. And again, don't even try the whole genetics thing. Like I mentioned with the blood pressure, maybe 1 out of every 350 people actually has some hereditary thing that leads to high blood pressure. It's such a small minute of people that definitely 100% need medication or would be aided by medication, etc. And I've had a lot of these clients come in with hereditary high blood pressure or cholesterol issues, etc. And then once we get them to master all of these concepts, or implement them even semi-well, their metabolic health markers return back to normal. It's kind of crazy. It's like magic. I'm saying that sarcastically because it's not magic. It's just getting a person to freaking live like a human being again, and then it's no surprise that they're going to be healthy and stuff of that sort, and have good metabolic health. So we'll do 3 more topics here. So you guys, sleep is very, very important as well, and it's free, okay? The best times to sleep for optimal health are going to be between basically 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. because your body repairs itself physically from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and mentally from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So you want to optimize that window as best as you can. And it's very important to get these steps right, because a lot of times people that say they sleep well, you look at their sleep logs and they're like, well, I was in bed at 10. And I'm like, okay, you're in bed at 10, but you actually went to sleep at 11. So if you average out throughout the week, you lost 7 hours of physical repair time, and then no wonder you kind of feel very beat up after your workouts, or you're not recovering from your workouts, or you just feel very physically tired all day, etc., etc. And it's important to also educate clients on how to have a good nighttime ritual. It's going to vary from person to person depending on how active their mind is or how active their body is. And then also a morning ritual as well. So the central nervous system starts associating certain patterns with winding down and going to bed, and thus you can actually sleep deeply, etc., etc. There's a lot that goes into that. I've done a few other podcasts on sleep on its own, so please check those out. If you want, I can send you the link as well. Just send me a comment and I'll include it in the comment section, okay? So another thing to consider, especially with the American audience, it's so common, the amount of micro and macro stressors in the person's life. That's so important to consider as well, because people, the average person, again, no absolutes. It's really tough to give any health advice without having the individual right in front of you explaining their particular situation. But the average person has a gargantuous amount of micro and combined with macro stressors in their life all the time without even being consciously aware of it, because it's been like that pretty much for their whole entire life. But the central nervous system is not good at dealing with that abundance of small and large stressors, especially when you combine them in a group. Small stressors being like being stuck in traffic. Stressors doesn't have to be mental either, just having chronic inflammation. So maybe having a gargantuous amount of omega-6 in relation to omega-3, having an injury, having an infection, all causes inflammation and stress on the central nervous system, etc., etc. Annoying coworker at work they have to put up with, or a macro stress would be a very pressing deadline that's very, very important, and you're kind of behind on it, or maybe don't even know what to do to solve the issue. So that's going to be a macro stress. Dealing with a boss you may not like, or that has maybe violent forms of communication and doesn't understand nonviolent forms of communication, that could be quite stressful and produce micro and macro stressors. And of course, those are to do with the external environment. There's a huge thing going on with the internal environment as well, such as if a person has a harsh internal critic. That's going to provide a lot of micro stress on the individual, possibly even in some rare kind of more extreme situations, a chronic macro stress as well. Because obviously, for a lot of people, if they listen to their internal critic, it's actually quite harsh. And in fact, it speaks more harshly to you than you speak with probably other people ever in the external world, even people you may not like at work or in your personal life. You'd never speak to them that way. But if you listen to that internal critic, is constantly speaking to you in that harsh way, and that creates, has the potential of creating a decent amount of micro and macro stress, which often does cause various maladaptive behavior, which leads to poor metabolic health. In this context, one of the more common ones is people using food as medicine, but in the wrong way. So a lot of times people overeat food or eat the wrong type of food, etc., knowingly, because food is unique in a sense that it kind of, a little bit cheesy, I know, but it kind of accepts you for who you are. It doesn't ask any questions, and the external world tends to be extremely conditional. You have to wear masks, and if you don't perform a certain way in society, etc., you're going to be kind of rejected out of the society or not be able to hold your job or stuff of this sort. But food, it does something rare. It doesn't ask any questions. It's kind of like your pet dog, It accepts you for who you are, and whoever that is, you know what I mean? And it doesn't ask any questions, and on top of that, it provides you love and affection, aka good tasting food. It makes you feel good. And then on top of that, food also provides another unique situation which a lot of people lack, or they feel they lack in the external world, and in some cases they actually do lack it, is, what's the word here that I'm looking for, is kind of power or free will. Because food, it's unique because you can pick it up, eat it. It gives you pleasure. It doesn't ask any questions, and you can put it down anytime you want. So you have that power dynamic as well, which a lot of people feel they lack in the external world. They feel they need to go to work that they may not like, et cetera, to continue to earn a paycheck. They feel they need to put on a mask at work to make sure their boss is happy and their coworkers are happy. AKA, they basically don't feel safe being themselves. They have to be what psychologists refer to, or maybe Walensky would refer to as like a conditioned self or a false self, to help them survive in the external world better, you know? And a lot of that, especially the more merged the person becomes with their false self, which pretty much probably 98% of people you run into are extremely identified with a pathological form of their false self, that's going to lead to maladaptive behavior. And that is going to lead to poor metabolic health down the line. And that's it. So, and then the very last one, and this one is very important. There are more variables than this to consider. And this one is very important, but in order to create lasting change for a person, inevitably you have to change the belief system that led to certain behaviors that led to these metabolic health issues, which again, 9 out of 10 Americans right now, as of 2025, are metabolically sick. And close to, I think last time I checked, 30% of Americans are on some type of psychiatric medication for mental illness. And those are the 30% that have the funds and resources available to be diagnosed for that mental illness. I would easily argue is probably around like 50 to 60% are like mentally ill and don't have the resources, education, and also the familiar or friend network to help them get back into a state of sustainable living. So that is so important. You have to change that belief system when it comes to chronic diseases like metabolic health issues, because if you don't, if you keep approaching a problem at the biological level, like these symptoms, you know, high blood pressure, high body fat, high triglycerides, et cetera, there's symptoms that present themselves at a biological level for sure, you know, but inevitably there is a belief system that is leading to certain behaviors that are leading to these issues at the biological level. So managing symptoms yields only more symptoms over time, okay? And what's happening if you just kind of, for example, take high blood pressure medication, okay, it'll suppress your blood pressure, but the belief system that led to the high blood pressure, if not dealt with, is going to lead to various other mental and physical disorders over the person's life. So their only hope then is just to get on more and more medical drugs, and chronic use of a lot of these medical drugs for a lot of people disrupt their biochemistry a tremendous amount. So it causes other side effects, which then they need more medical drugs for. So it kind of sets up this avalanche effect. And then I'm sure you guys at least know a few people in your circle that are like 40, 50, 60. They're like on 10 medical drugs and look worse and feel worse than ever before. Because you can't medically drug yourself into a life of health and happiness. It's just not going to happen. And in fact, again, as of 2025, Americans are the most medically drugged out humans in all of human history, but yet still are mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history. So come on, results speak for themselves, you know. The sick care healthcare system, it's an epic failure. It doesn't work. So you got to change the belief system. What I also refer to it as commonly as the mind virus. Because think about it, a virus kills a living organism. But a belief system that doesn't facilitate health conscious choices also kills a living organism through creating various behaviors that lead to poor metabolic health, for example, you know, and then eventually the organism dies. And just like a virus spreads from one person to another person, these belief systems also are a virus, information virus that spread from one person to another person. And in fact, I would argue they're the most dangerous virus the human race has ever seen, the Homo sapien has ever seen. And it's killed more people than any other virus or war that has been seen in the history of the Homo sapiens. So 250,000 years. Guarantee you it's killed far, far more people than World War II, World War I, the Black Plague, etc., etc. And these belief systems are passed down from parents to kids, which then those kids pass those belief systems down, et cetera, and stuff of that sort. So it's important to kind of look at it in a broad perspective and from multiple vantage points, because that's just how the world works. Like your car needs more than just its wheels to function. And it's the same thing with the human body. It has, there are 12 systems. They're all very important. They're all very unique, and they're all very variable from person to person as well. And especially when you take into considerations of a person's starting place, their environment, their IQ, et cetera, what they're able to carry out and all that stuff. So I hope this was helpful. Again, anyone that's struggling with metabolic health, everyone's journey is of course different, but you can go check out my website, trufkinathletics.com. I at least have 6 or 7 clients on there. You can see their before and after pictures. You can see their before and after blood work. And I also did the interviews with them. You can see what they did and all the changes they made in their life. It may not work for you or be appropriate for you, but at least you can get some ideas of how to investigate further. And all of them, some of them were on statins, high blood pressure meds, et cetera, before the program, and then became healthy enough to not need to be on them. Some of them were not on it, but had poor metabolic health. Like client Igor I interviewed, he went to the doctors, and the doctor said he needed to be on, statins, high blood pressure meds, something to bring down his triglycerides as well. And so 5 months later, just with working out with adjustable dumbbells at home, he's like an IT professional that worked remotely, and going hiking from time to time. And of course, we changed a bunch of stuff in his nutrition that I customized for him. I gave him a 3-hour assessment before even writing out a program for him. And we worked on a gargantuous amount of lifestyle re-engineering, which is very important as well. In 5 months, we got all his metabolic markers to be like, not just in the good range, but ideal range, drug-free. Okay. And I've seen this happen over and over and over and over again. But, the drug-free approach, again, only works for people that are, again, willing to change the person that's causing the disease. You don't have to look too much further than your mirror to find who that is, okay? So I wish you guys the best. Have a good weekend. And Rob, Christian, saw a few other people jumped in. Good to see you guys. Caesar as well. Don. Have a good weekend, okay, guys? Hope this was helpful.